Welcome to the Mainframe Security Insights Platform version 1.0 video about how to examine classification and pervasive encryption by resource. Unsecured sensitive or regulated data, such as social security numbers, credit card numbers, or medical records, poses a threat to your organization. If this critical data is left unsecured, your organization risks data breaches, heavy fines for regulatory noncompliance, and negative audit findings. Enterprise data protection strategies include identifying critical resources and securing those critical resources using encryption. Do you know which resources are considered high risk and whether those high-risk resources are encrypted? To determine whether a resource is considered high risk, you need to know the classification of its data. Classification is the act of categorizing data into groups based on its patterns. A resource's classifications can indicate whether it includes potentially sensitive or regulated data, which helps you determine how secure that resource must be. For example, a resource classified as having social security numbers is of concern because they're considered personally identifiable information and are protected by government regulations. Our data protection and classification solution, Data Content Discovery, helps you identify data classifications through scheduled automatic scans of your mainframe data at rest and data in motion on a recurring basis, letting you continuously monitor your data to reduce risk and simplify regulatory compliance. Pervasive encryption provides additional layers of security by requiring a user to have access to the key label to view the data as human-readable text, and to have access to the ZOS Integrated Cryptographic Service Facility API to access that key label. The Security Insights Classifier Report aggregates classification data from Data Content Discovery and encryption data from your ZOS environment. Together, this data lets you easily identify high-risk resources that are unencrypted and the risk findings and recommendations per resource. Let's log in to Security Insights using mainframe credentials to build a classifier report. From the home page, select Build Report on the Examine Classification and Pervasive Encryption by Resource tile. To start building your report, select the system to run your report against. Then specify the resources to examine. You can enter fully or partially qualified dataset names. We suggest you assess your mainframe storage to identify the high-level qualifiers of data sources that are most at risk. Then create reports for the highest risk HLQs first. For faster report generation times, you could split the HLQ inventory across multiple reports. Next, select a risk configuration for your report. We provide a default risk configuration, or you can build your own by clicking Create Configuration. A risk configuration defines the parameters for evaluating the risk to your mainframe data. Based on the risk configuration, the report results provide a risk level and recommendations per resource record. This information offers you a better understanding of your security posture. Our default configuration provides out-of-the-box risk parameters for classifier match count, pervasive encryption for eligible resources that have matched classifiers, and scan status. These parameters can impact your overall risk score, so you have the ability to fine-tune them based on your site policy and requirements. Now select Build Report. Optionally, give your report a meaningful name to make it easy to locate, and include an email address to be notified when a report status change occurs, such as when it completes. Click Create Report. Your report begins to generate. When your report completes, click the report name hyperlink to review the results. Let's take a look at the results for an out-of-the-box sample report. The risk level provides a risk assessment per resource based on the risk parameters in the selected risk configuration and the recommended steps to mitigate the risks. This information helps you prioritize and address security vulnerabilities. Click the risk level label to see the details and recommendations. Optionally, you can view the scores by toggling on the Show Scores option. The data source column shows the data sources that you included in your report criteria. The masks or data sets that you included are expanded using the ZOS catalog lookup to show you an inventory of what existed when the report was run, providing a snapshot in time. You can rerun the report to get the latest findings to identify risk on an ongoing basis. The volume serial column shows where the datasets reside on your system. The pervasive encryption column shows whether the dataset is pervasively encrypted or if it is not eligible for pervasive encryption. Examples of eligible datasets are sequential and VSAM datasets in extended format. The pervasive encryption status lets you quickly identify unencrypted data sources that might pose a risk. If the dataset is pervasively encrypted, the key label column shows its encryption key label. This label helps you when permitting access to an encrypted data source to specific authorized users. The Classifiers Matched Scan column shows the count of classifiers that the dataset matched as compared to the count of classifiers that the dataset was scanned for. This count helps you determine which datasets might include at-risk data that requires additional safeguards. The LPAR scanned and last scan date columns show where and when the data source was last scanned by data content discovery. This LPAR can be different from the LPAR that you selected when you ran the report. For example, the data source that was scanned might be on a shared DASD and was scanned by a data content discovery controller on another system. If we sort the risk level in descending order, we can inspect resources that constitute the highest risk so that we can identify which at-risk resources to protect first. For example, Finance NA All not only has classifier matches, but also is not pervasively encrypted, which means it likely includes sensitive or regulated data and is a candidate for additional security layers, such as pervasive encryption. To see the risk findings and classification details, click the data source name. The Risk Level tab shows the risk findings and recommendations, which we saw on the previous page. For example, we see that the classifier's match count is 2 out of 2, which means the resource might include potentially sensitive data. Under Recommendations, we see a suggestion for the security admin to work with the data owner to safeguard the data source, and to optionally start monitoring this data source using Compliance Event Manager. The Classifiers tab shows the classifiers that Data Content Discovery scanned for, and whether each classifier was matched. If Data Content Discovery is running on multiple LPARs across your Sysplex, the classification count and details reflect data captured across all Data Content Discovery instances. In this video, you learned the importance of identifying and encrypting critical resources, and how to create a classifier report so that you can understand the classification of resources in your mainframe to determine which resources are at risk, identify which at-risk resources are unencrypted so that you can encrypt them, and review recommendations for limiting risk to these resources. To learn more about Security Insights, go to the product page of this URL. From the product page, you can access services, product documentation, learning paths, and communities. To learn more about data content discovery, go to the product page at this URL, or watch our data content discovery YouTube videos at this URL.